Hello and welcome back to the course on R programming. In the previous tutorial we prepared our dataset for analysis, so now that we have the region column in this merged data frame, and today we're going to visualize it. And first off, we're going to use the same qplot function, so in that way it's going to be very similar to what we've already done when we were creating this beautiful plot. And therefore, well, first of all, let me type in the name, visualizing. There we go. So, and that's why, because it's going to be very similar, that's why I wanted to encourage you to pause this video and go and try to practice that on your own, to just try and create that plot based on what you already know about qplot and what we've already seen and trained how to do. So try and create it and then come back to the video and we'll compare the results. And now I'll proceed to creating this visualization. Alright, so follow along with the code and we're going to get this done. And also, by the way, it's not going to be just a repetition of what we've already done. We will also learn a couple of new tricks with qplot. I've got some things I wanted to show you. So qplot, and don't forget we need the library ggplot2, but we've already got it loaded, so that's sorted. So data equals merged, that's our data frame that we're visualizing, and then we've got x equals internet users, and y is going to be birth rate. So just as last time, birth rate, right? So if we run that, there we go. So now we can just copy paste and improve our visualization step by step. Here we're going to say color equals region. Remember, we don't need the I if we are mapping a variable rather than applying it to all of the values. So here we go. That is pretty much the end result that we were after. We've mapped the region, but once again, we want this to look nice. We want it to tell a story. Here, it's still very small. So let's start fixing it up. And also, let's learn quite a few new things. So first thing we're going to learn is shapes. I will show you how to change the shapes of the scatter plot. All right, so let's say I want to paste that, or actually, I want to copy that and paste that. And here, after region, what I want to say is first we need to increase the size, and we use the letter I, and then we want to say shape. So I'm going to start with just one shape, and then we will explore what other shapes exist. So if you run that, then you can see that we've got triangles now, right? Looks like a little forest. And so what's up with this shape parameter? What kind of shapes can we have? Well, I've got a small chart prepared for you here, and you can have shapes from 0 to 25. So at the start, you've got kind of like hollow shapes, the first 3, then you've got these and another hollow. So all of these are pretty much hollow up to here. The filled shapes is good to remember. They're 15, 16, 17, up to 20, and then 21, 25. If you ever forget, you can always just type in R shapes in Google, and this is, you'll get one of these pictures right away. So let's try a couple more. Let's see how this chart will change if we, actually let's just try it right here. Let's say shape number 2, the hollow triangle. And if we run that, you can see that here it's a bit different and you can see a bit better. So you can see where triangles overlap. It might be a better option for some charts. Let's try another one. Let's try 15. 15 is squares, right? And 23. 23 is hollow rhomboids or diamonds. Okay. So that's enough playing around with that, but at least now you have learned how to create, how to change the shape of the points on your scatter plot. All right, so now what are we going to do? Now we're going to learn about transparency. So that's the second thing I wanted to show you today is transparency. All right, so we're going to copy what we already have, and let's say shape number 19. If we run that, you'll see that it's not hollow, and sometimes they overlap, right? So sometimes you've got overlapping shapes, and that might hide some of the dots and might misrepresent your data. So how do you fix that? Well, it's very simple. You add transparency, and to add transparency, you use the parameter which is called alpha. So you type in alpha equals, once again, we're setting transparency for all the dots, and here you type in a value from 0 to 1, right? So basically 0 is fully transparent, 1 is fully opaque. So let's say 0.1, and let's have a look at that. So if I run that, you can see that very transparent, very like they're fading, can barely see them. So let's say 0.6. See, that's already better. So when they overlap, you can actually see that they're overlapping. You can kind of see behind the dots. So there you go. And it's very useful for scatter plots where you have lots and lots of observations to see where there are clusters of observations, because those areas will be darker when observations overlap. Okay. And finally, the third thing I wanted to show you is how to add the title to your visualization. Right now we don't have a title up at the top, so let's go ahead and add one. It's very simple. You just need to use the parameter which is called main. So if I type in comma main, so you can see how we're chaining more and more parameters. We've got all of this is all being passed into qplots, and you can keep going for quite a while. And here we're going to say birth rate vs something simple, internet users. Let's give it some more space and let's run that. Whoops, there we go. So here you can see the title has appeared now. Well, there we go. That's how we used a qplot to create another awesome visualization. And also we learned a couple of things about qplots, shapes, transparency, and how to set the title. And we will talk much more about visualization further down in the course. We will learn a even more powerful function, which is a ggplot. Can't wait to tell you all about it and for us to go through those tutorials. And this brings us to the end for today. I hope you enjoyed these past couple of tutorials and you learned quite a lot about data frames and also some basics of visualization. As you can see, it's not hard at all and can help you create very powerful insights. And I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial. Until then, happy coding! Hello and welcome back to the course on R programming. And today we're going to recap on what we learned in this section about data frames. Alright, in this section we learned: number one, we saw how to import data into R. That was a very exciting tutorial, and for me personally it was quite exciting because up until this section it has been quite challenging supplying data sets for our learning because we didn't know how to import data into R, and I had to supply the data sets through our code and existing vectors and code that you would have to run. But now that we've learned how to import data into R, going forward we can use CSV files and we can just import the data into R, so it's going to be much more convenient. And I was very excited to finally get this topic covered off, because ultimately when you're working with R in your day-to-day job or in your hobbies, you're going to be importing data as CSV files or other types of files, so it's always important to know these things. And in this specific case, we looked at how to first of all import data using the read CSV function and then choosing the file that we want manually. And also then we saw how we can change the working directory. So whether you're on Windows or Mac, now you know how to change the working directory of your RStudio so that then you can actually type in the name of the file into your code. So that was quite an exciting tutorial. Then we moved on to exploring datasets. So I showed you some of the tricks that I use to explore datasets, because it's always important to get acquainted with your dataset and also check for errors. And some of the functions that I recommend using are head to check the top 6 rows or whatever number of rows you specify, tail to check the bottom rows, then the summary to get the summary of all of the columns in your dataset, and the str for structure to get the overall structure of your dataset and see what type of columns it has and some just sample values from there. So that's what we did for exploring datasets. Then we learned how to use the $sign. So the $sign is very specific to data frames. It allows you to it's kind of a shortcut to accessing the columns by their names, because usually in a data frame columns would have names, because that's how data is normally stored in its source. And then you can just say the data frame's name, $sign, and then the column name. That way it's a very quick approach to accessing separate columns in your data frame. That way it's a very quick approach to accessing separate columns in your data frame. Next, we talked about basic operations with data frame. So here we saw that we could look at different columns, we could add them, we could perform mathematical operations with them, we could add columns into data frames, we could get rid of columns from data frames, by just setting them to null and things like that. So very simple things, operations with data frames. They were pretty straightforward and quite made quite a lot of sense. And also, by the way, in these tutorials, we also talked about factors. So that was our kind of first encounter with factors, and that they have different levels. And we'll talk more about factors further down in the course, but it was good to know how R stores categorical variables, because we did have a couple of those in our data sets. Then we talked about filtering a data frame. It's a very important topic, but at the same time, like, even though it may have seemed to be a bit complicated, it's not at all. And we saw that in that tutorial, that filtering a data frame is you just create a logical variable, which is the filter, and then you use that to filter out the rows. And in fact, you can actually combine the two, so it all fits in one line. And that's what filtering a data frame is all about, just selecting the rows you want based on some certain criteria. And then we had an introduction to qplot. So it was just basically a quick tutorial to see what kind of function it is and what it is capable of doing. Kind of like a teaser of what's coming up in the next section, when we'll be talking a lot about visualization. Then we actually used qplot to solve the challenge. We built a beautiful scatter plot that told a wonderful story about internet usage and birth statistics, and that was the deliverable that we were after. So basically we solved the challenge, but then we got an additional challenge and some additional data. So we moved on to the next part of the section, where we were building data frames. We used the data.frame function, which is kind of very similar to cbind. So combining a set of vectors into a matrix using as if they were columns. Data frame does a similar thing, but it combines the vectors into a data frame. And also here we learned how to specify the names of the columns of the data frame right away in the data frame function. So a shortcut that allows us to avoid using the call names function. And that's something that you will definitely see in other people's codes, just because that's the normal convention of doing things. Then we talked about merging data frames. We used the merge function, and that's a way to join two data frames together based on one column that they share. So one column that they have in common, you can merge the two data frames together to get a bigger data frame with the data from the two first data frames. So that is a very important thing to know. And there is so much more to merging in R. So that was just like us getting an introduction to merging. When you do encounter merging in your day-to-day work, it's always a good idea to go and learn more about this topic, because you can create inner joins, you can create outer joins, you can get different types of joins. We just did the very basic join, and you already saw that it's very simple. So it's very easy to get up to speed. It just depends on what you will need for your day-to-day role, but it's very good that we have already covered off the basics of merging in this section. And then we talked about qplot again. So we covered off some interesting parts of qplot, like we talked about shapes, we talked about setting transparency, so the alpha parameter, and we talked about changing the title of our plot. And if you enjoyed that, you'll definitely enjoy the next section of the course, because we'll be talking about visualization all the time. It will be all dedicated to building stunning visualizations that will captivate your audience. So I hope you enjoyed this section and you learned a lot about data frames. Data frames are indeed our door into the world of analytics and data science, because that is basically how you store the data you're analyzing in R, and that's how you work with it in this programming language. And remember to do the quiz for this section to have a quick self-assessment. And of course, as always, I have another interesting homework challenge prepared for you. I'm sure you're going to enjoy that and get some valuable hands-on time with our programming. And I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial. And until then, happy coding! Hello and welcome to the homework exercise on world trends. I hope you enjoyed this section of the course on data frames, and today we have a great opportunity to practice all of those skills that we learned and really let that knowledge sink in. So let's jump right into this challenge. The challenge is, The World Bank was very impressed with your deliverables on the previous assignment and they have a new project for you, as it often is in data science. You are required to produce a scatter plot depicting life expectancy on the y-axis and fertility rate on the x-axis, statistics by country. The scatter plot needs to also be categorized by country's regions. Next page. Ooh, there's more. Okay. What's more here? You have been supplied with data for 2 years, 1960 and 2013, and you're required to produce a visualization for each of these years. Some data has been provided in a CSV file, some in R vectors. The CSV file contains combined data for both years. All data and manipulations have to be performed in R, not in Excel, because this project may be audited at a later stage. You have also been requested to provide insights into how the two periods compare. Very, very interesting. So this time it's different. So very similar to what we've done, but different. Different how? Well, first of all, now we have 2 years, right? Instead of just the 1 year, we have 2 years. So we'll have 2 visualizations. And then also some data has been provided in CSV, some in R vectors. We know that, but the CSV file contains combined data for both years. So both 1960 and 2013 are in one file. That's going to add a bit of complication to our work. And all data manipulations have to be performed in R. So you can't just go and fix up your data in Excel and then import it into R. And the reason why they're saying that is because this project may be audited at a later stage. So basically you're supplied with data, and this is often the case in data science, especially if you're in consulting, but even if you're not in consulting. So when I went into the industry and I was setting up a data science team for a large financial corporation, still we always took care about these audit trails, because all the things you do in Excel, you do them and then nobody knows exactly what you did. But if you write up code in R or another programming language, then you can always trace back exactly what happened and how you got from point A to point B. So that's why they want everything performed in R. And finally, you're required to provide insights to compare the 2 years. That's going to be interesting as well. All right, so there's the challenge. Let's have a look at where to get the data set. If you go to superdatascience.com/R course and you scroll down to section 5, data frames, and it's growing very quickly. Here you can see homework challenge, that's the PDF file. And then this is what you're going to need: homework dataset and homework vectors. So those are the 2 files you need. If you're comfortable at attacking this challenge right away, give it a go, see how you can solve this problem. But now what I want to do is I want to give you 2 hints. As always, I want to give you 2 hints. So let's go back to the presentation. First hint, are you ready for this? Hint number 1. All right, this is relating to the CSV file. After you import the CSV file into R, the first step is to split the data frame into 2. So you've got a data frame with 2 sets of data in it. Well, the best approach will be to split the data into 2 data frames. In order to achieve this, use data frame filtering we discussed in this section. So remember where you have like square brackets and then you say, so let's say our data is data in the data frame called, let's say, df, for instance. Then you'd say df square brackets df $. The column you want to filter on is greater or less than or equal to double equal sign. Then you put your condition in and then you put another comma and then nothing, right? So that's the approach that you will need to use in order to filter out or split your data into 2 data frames. And then from there, it's pretty simple. From there, you just do exactly what we did in this section. So that way you get to practice both data filtering and visualization and all the other techniques, or most of them that we learned in this section. So there you go. That's hint number 1. And probably now you should be quite confident as the steps. So I find the best way to attack a challenge is to break it down into steps and understand how you're going to approach it. So there's your first step. And from there, you probably already remember the steps that we've taken before. So give it a go and try and attempt this challenge, and then come back and look at the solution. We'll compare there. Otherwise, if you want hint number 2, then I'm happy to give it to you. Hint number 2 is, of course, the fill in the blanks exercise. So let's go and check it out. You can download it here, fill in the blanks exercise. It's an R file. Well, it's a zip file, which is an R file, has an R file inside. So here I've got the fill in the blanks exercise, which I've prepared for you. And all you have to do is find everywhere where you see this underscore. Well, actually, if you highlight like that, you'll see it it's highlighted already for us. That's great. You just have to replace it with some code. So here we set the working direction. I've put a lot of comments in to explain the steps that we're taking. You import the data, you explore the data like we've done. So I've explained exactly what we're looking for here and so on. So go ahead and download this file, and that way you already kind of have the step-by-step approach in the file prepared for you. All you have to do is remember the bits and pieces of code that we've talked about. Maybe, you know, take a sneak peek into the tutorials that we've had, and just populate the code instead of these underscores, including these underscores over here. That way you'll get to practice everything we learned again. All right, so that's it. And after you're done, have a look at the solution. I will post it at the very end of the course in the separate section with solutions. And I wish you best of luck with this challenge. I look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, happy coding.